Welcome back to Tanya. We're up to chapter 16. So we've been explaining now for a while, for a few chapters, since chapter 12, the service of a normal person that is called a Beinoni. And that is every single one of us, really, who has, in general, control over their thought, speech, and action. So every one of us always has control over our thought, speech, and action. And that being said, the struggle to do that can be hard at times. And the way to ease it and to make it actually a easy control is by having emotional love for what you want to do, in our case, to serve God. So how do you get an emotional love, or love is the one side, or also awe of God? That is through thinking about God, thinking about God's greatness, and we're going to bring later in Tanya about the different processes of thought that you can actually think about, starting from chapter 41, if I'm not mistaken, down till maybe chapter 50, 51. And when you think about these things, then it gives birth to an emotion of love, an emotion of awe. And once you have an emotion of awe or emotion of love, it'll be easy, so to speak, to bring out those feelings in thought, speech, and action. So we were learning in the previous chapter that one has to constantly increase in your thinking about God. Don't be complacent with the current emotional feeling that you have for God, but instead always strive to increase your love of God and increase your awe of God through the thinking about God. The Perek Tet Zayin, chapter 16. V'zeh klal gadol ba'avodat Hashem lebeinonim. This is a big rule for the service of God for Beinonim, which is, like we said, everybody. The main thing is to rule and control the nature in the left ventricle of the heart, which is referring to the animal soul, which desires naturally materialistic things, which are really selfish, primarily. And controlling that through the light of God, which shines toward the godly soul that is in the mind, and control the heart. Like we said, the mind controls the heart. When he thinks in his mind and contemplates about the greatness of the infinite one, blessed be he, to then, from that thinking and contemplation, bring about a spirit of attachment and focus and an awe of God in his mind, to, from that awe of God in the mind, to practically turn away from evil, whether it's something prohibited by the Torah or by the rabbis, and even a slight prohibition of the sages, chas v'shalom, God forbid, v'ahavat Hashem b'libo b'chalal hayamini, v'chasheka v'chafetza l'davka b'bakim ha'mitzvot de'oraita v'de'chabanan v'talmutoch shekeneged kulan, and a love of God in his heart, in the right ventricle, to have a longing and a desire to attach himself in God through the fulfillment of the mitzvot, whether they are by the Torah, commandments by the Torah, or the commandments by the rabbis, and the study of Torah, which is equal to all of the mitzvot. When one studies Torah, then it's as if they're fulfilling all of the 613 mitzvot. Now, this is something that it needs a big emphasis, because we, or I don't know who we might be including, but a lot of people, I would say, miss this big point over here. And this is the whole point, really, I think, of Chabad Hasidus. And that is the importance, like he says over here, of taking time to think about God, which is called in Hebrew hitbonenut, or contemplation. And when you do that, and you do that as often as possible, quantity-wise, also with great quality as well, then you'll have a feeling of love and awe of God. And then it'll, so to speak, become easy to do Judaism. Judaism doesn't become a burden anymore, because you love God and you have an awe of God. And this happens through thinking, and therefore it's so important. So now, that is the natural order. However, we also have to know a big rule in the service of God for a Beinoni, for what is expected of all of us. Shigam im ein yad sichlo, v'ruach binato maseget, leholid, ahavat Hashem b'itkalut libo. Even if the extent of his mind and the spirit of his contemplation will not be able to reach a birthing of love of God, bitkalut libo, in a revealed form in his heart, that his heart be burning like a flaming fire, v'chafetz b'chafetza v'chasheka v'tshuka murgeshet belev lidabik bo, and a desire and a longing and a will and a yearning that is felt in the heart to attach to God. Instead, the love is hidden in his mind and in the depths of his heart. And that means that he isn't able to actually feel those emotions. The natural order is that from a thought comes out an emotion. And that's how it should work. And sometimes it just doesn't work. It doesn't happen. He thinks and he doesn't feel. והסיבה לזה היא מפני היות המוחין שלו ונפש רוח הנשמה שלו מבחינת עיבור והלם תוך התבונה ולמבחינת לידה והתקלות כידוע לידיכן. And the reason for this is because the mind that he has and his thought, speech, and action, the makeup really of his soul, is in a form of pregnancy and concealment inside of the emotions of the mind. That means not the emotions of the heart, but the emotions of the mind. And it's not in a form of birth and revelation, as is known to those who study Kabbalah. That is, that there are two kinds of people. One that are in the form of pregnancy. That means that whatever they feel is concealed, or even more, that whatever's in their mind is concealed. They don't actually express their thoughts properly. Instead, everything is kind of blocked up. There's some sort of separation between their mind and their heart. And there are some people who are in the form of giving birth and revelation. And that is that there's a opening of channels from the mind and to the heart and to the rest of the body. And we'll just clearly rank again the levels. So the lowest level is action, and then above that is speech, above that is thought, above the thought is the emotions in the heart, above the emotions in the heart there is the intellect. And we'll stop there for now, even though there's higher levels. So there's naturally going to be a blockage between all these levels. Each one of the levels has a blockage in between them because it's a whole different species. It's a whole different animal, so to speak. Intellect and emotions are completely different. From intellect to emotions, there needs to be a complete transformation, so that only the tiniest amount can actually reach those emotions. And the same thing from emotions to the thought. In order to reach the thought, first of all, there's a blockage, there's a concealment, and then can squeeze out a drop of emotions can actually come into the thought. And then, same thing from the thought, only a drop of it can come into the speech, because naturally there's a blockage, concealment between each of the levels. Same thing between the speech and action. Now, that is a certain kind of person, and that's also maybe more normal, let's say, that there's a blockage between these levels. And then you also have people who the blockage is opened up. And that means straight from the intellect, it goes directly into the emotions. There's an opening. And straight from the emotions, there's an opening into the thought. Straight from the thought, there's an opening into the speech. And straight from the speech, there's an opening into the action. And that is like, for example, you see when you really care about something really, really means something to you, then you'll just come at it with your fullest self. And everything will open up. Your intellect will open up into your emotions, to your thought, speech, and action. Now, the problem with this person that we're speaking about over here is he's using his intellect. He's thinking about God as much as he can. However, it's still blocked and it doesn't reach his emotions. דהיינו שהלב מבין ברוח חוכמה ובינה שבמוחו גדולת אינסוף ברוך הוא דכולה קמא כלחשיב ממש. That means that this person, he doesn't have a tangible feeling, but the spirit of chachma, which we said is thinking in the heart and understanding in the mind, does understand and appreciate, let's say, the greatness of the Infinite One, blessed be He, and that everything in front of Him is like completely unimportant, literally. Again, that is one of the processes of thinking about God, that in front of God, everything is basically meaningless, or actually literally meaningless. אשר על כן יתה לו יתברך שתכלה אליו נפש כל חי לדבק ולקלל באורו. And because of this appreciation, they will actually have a decision in their mind and even a cognizant feeling that everything should long for God, a desire for God, to become attached to Him and absorbed in His divine light. וגם נפשו ורוחו אשר בקרבו, and so too the speech and action inside of him, כך יתה להן, will long and desire. להיות קלות אליו, to be cleaved, to be absorbed in God, בחשקה וחפצה, with a desire and longing, לצאת מניחתקן הוא הגוף, to come out of their sheath, which is like a blockage, a concealment. What is the concealment of the soul, of the thought, speech, and action even? That is the body, the dafka, to come out of there, to become attached to God. But it's against their will that they are living in the body, the intellect, emotions, thought, speech, and action. And they are bound in the body like living widows. What is a living widow? That's a woman who, God forbid, her husband leaves her completely, and now she can't remarry, because she's not divorced, she's still considered married, so she can't remarry. But on the other hand, her husband's not there. And so that's the same thing with the God that left us. God left the Jewish people, so to speak. We're not constantly living in a state of attachment to God. Instead, we're locked in our bodies. I'm talking about the souls, the godly soul. And what does that mean, therefore? What should we strive if we would desire God? What should we strive to do? And because we're again bound in the body, our thoughts cannot grasp Him at all. Only when our thoughts grasp and express themselves in the Torah and its mitzvot. Like the parable of one who hugs the king that we mentioned earlier, that a king might be wearing 100 garments or many different layers of garments. But when you hug the king, you're hugging the king. It doesn't matter how many garments he's wearing. So too is the Torah might be God's many garments. After many, many processes of coming into different forms, whether that's physical forms, which is the Torah that we have that's revealed to us, or other kinds of forms. But when we are learning the Torah and when we are fulfilling the mitzvot, we are actually hugging God, like we mentioned earlier in chapter 4 and 5. And once a person understands this and appreciates that he wants, because of God's greatness, and there's no other way to attach himself through Torah, then he'll desire to hug Him with entire heart and soul, very much, which is how the Hainu Kiyum, through, that is through the fulfillment of Teriach Mitzvot b'Maisa b'Machshava, the 613 commandments, mitzvot, in action, speech, and thought. Shehi hasagat v'diyat haTorah haniskoch le'il. And that is the understanding and the knowing of the Torah that we mentioned earlier. That's the thought of doing the mitzvot. The thought of doing the mitzvot is the understanding and knowledge of the Torah. So this person doesn't have a tangible emotional feeling because there's a blockage between the intellect and the heart. And that might be very natural. In fact, the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, visited Sigmund Freud. And Sigmund Freud asked him, how can you make a connection between intellect and emotions? They're like two different continents. So the Rebbe Rashab replied, yes, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to make that one continent should connect with the other continent. The intellect should connect with the feelings. However, this person's not there yet. And so intellectually, he appreciates that he should do Torah and mitzvot because of his thinking, that the process of thinking that we just read, we just learned. However, emotionally, he doesn't feel that. And what does that mean? That means a lot of times people can understand that an emotion is befitting for them, but they never actually felt that emotion before. You could have someone that appreciates and understands intellectually that it's a good thing to be merciful, and they'll act that way, and they'll be merciful to others, and they'll be compassionate to others. But an actual feeling, an emotion of compassion, they never really felt. And that's the same thing with this person. He doesn't have a tangible feeling. It could be that he can tell you from today to tomorrow about the emotion, and he could teach others about the emotion. But feeling the emotion, that's another step. And that he doesn't have. הנה, כשמעמיק בעניין זה בתעלומות תבונות ליבו ומוחו, ופיו וליבו שווים, שמקיים כן בפיו, כפי אשר נגמח בתבונות ליבו ומוחו. Now, when he deepens the thought in this idea with the depths of the intellect of the heart, and his mind and his mouth and his heart is equal, meaning that he fulfills this in his mouth, the way he decided in the emotions of the heart and the mind. Now, we should just pause right here and just explain really quickly. So, from getting to the intellect to the emotions, we said that there is a pregnancy process. And that means that the emotions slowly develop themselves in the mind first, in the intellect first. So there's the intellect, and then there is the unborn emotions still there in the intellect. And then eventually, what should happen is it comes into birth into the heart. So, what this person has is just the undeveloped emotions in his mind that hasn't actually been born into his heart yet. However, he is deciding, making a decision to fulfill all the mitzvot in thought, speech, and action because of the emotions in the mind. So again, the emotions of the heart he's missing. However, the action, the performance for him is being done based off of the unborn emotions in his mind. That causes him, the emotions in the mind, cause him to have involvement in the Torah of God and a desire for it and involvement in it, yom and v'layla, day and night. Befiv, in his mouth, which is speech. And so too, the hands and other limbs fulfill the mitzvot, which is action. According to what was decided in the emotions of the mind. Okay. So this emotion, this intellectual emotion, which is the emotions in the mind, comes into the action, speech, and thought of the Torah. And its mitzvot liyot lehem bechinat mochin v'chayut v'gadfin leparcha le'elan, so that that thought, speech, and action has intellect and life and wings to fly up above. Ki'ilu asak behem, I'll explain in a minute, ki'ilu asak behem, betchilu v'rechimu mamash, asher v'itkalut libo, as if he involved himself in those thoughts, speech, and action with a literal love and awe, which are in a revealed state in his heart. With a love, desire, and longing that is felt in his heart, and his soul that is thirsty for God, because of the flaming fire, which is the love in his heart that we mentioned earlier. So the emotions are called wings, because the love and awe in the heart, which are the emotions, come into the thought, speech, and action. And they cause the thoughts, what's the idea of wings? They cause the thought, speech, and action to be elevated to a higher plane, to a higher level, a higher world, as we'll actually explain what those higher levels are at the end of this chapter briefly. And this person who doesn't have emotions Nevertheless, and this is the key point of this chapter, his mind that has underdeveloped emotions there intellectually, again, emotions that are in his intellect, not yet in the heart, that is enough to elevate his thought, speech, and action to the higher planes, as we will explain at the end of this chapter. Why do they elevate? How come they have the emotions in the intellect have the ability to do that? It's because these emotions in the intellect and the depths of his heart, which are hidden, is the thing that causes him to do what they're doing. It is what causes them to fulfill the Torah and mitzvot. And if he wouldn't be thinking, and if it wasn't for the emotions in the intellect, he would not be fulfilling those things, those mitzvot, in thought, speech, and action at all. Only with necessities of his body. Naturally, a person just does what his body needs. Eats, sleeps, drinks, and any other bodily necessities. But thanks to the emotions in the intellect, he is doing and speaking and thinking all things that are for the sake of God, or mitzvot. And even someone that we mentioned earlier has a natural ability to sit down and be consistent in his learning. And nevertheless, that's not enough. He still loves his body more naturally. And it's only due to, or like we said, the emotions in the intellect, or to the hidden love that he naturally feels that he has an obligation to do what God wants. Thanks to that, he's actually doing that in thought, speech, and action. Otherwise, he wouldn't be. So this is what the sages hinted to when they said that a good thought, God connects it to the action. And that means that when someone has a good thought to do a mitzvah, and they're, for whatever reason, beyond their control, are not able to, God makes it as if they did the mitzvah. So the sages should have said those words, that it is as if they did a mitzvah, but they didn't use those words. What words did they use? God connects the thought to the action. What does it mean that God connects the thought to the action? As we were explaining now. Instead, the awe and love and the revealed state in the heart are what come into the action of the performance of the mitzvot to give them life. Ki halev hu gam ken chumari ki shar ivarim shem kli hamaaseh. Why is it that the emotions that a person has actually has an effect on the actions that one does? Because where are the emotions? They're in the heart. So the heart is also physical, like the rest of the limbs that carry out action. And it is just a more internal limb in the body and it gives life to the rest of them, of the limbs. And therefore, because it is also physical, it can come into them. The emotions of the heart can come into the limbs to be for the actions that those limbs do, wings to elevate them above, to bring them up. However, the awe and love, which is in the emotions that is in the intellect, or that which is that love that is or awe that is in the depths of the heart, it's not tangibly felt, that still hasn't actualized itself in the person. Their way is exalted very up high, from the level of action. And they are not able to express themselves in the action of the mitzvot. To be for them intellect and wings to elevate them to fly up high. Why? Because they're so far removed. The emotions can elevate the action because it's felt. The emotions are tangible. They're felt in the physical heart. And so it's close. It's the same category as the action. Physical to physical. The heart to the limbs. So it can actually elevate them. It can elevate the action. However, the hidden emotions or the emotions in the intellect are so far removed that they can't elevate the actions. So that is where God comes into the picture. God comes and he allows you to work in a way above nature. And that is as follows. That God connects and attaches them, the emotions of the intellect, to the action. So thanks to him, there's actually an elevation of the action from the depths of the heart, from those emotions that are hidden in the intellect. And those are what we call, or the sages called, a good thought. Because it's not literal, felt, tangible awe and love. In the revealed form in the heart. And said the motions of the mind and the depths of the heart, like we mentioned earlier. And an example for this is from a physical body. So first you have the head, then the body, and then the legs. So that is a parable for the intellect, the emotions, and the limbs of action. And while the intellect is still in the mind, then it hasn't actually come into the main body, which is the emotions. The main body of you, of a person, what is your main makeup? Your body. What is your body? The emotions in our parable. So they're still not actualized. The potential is not actualized. And really, they shouldn't be able to connect to the action. How can intellect connect to the action if it didn't go through emotions first? And especially if it's so far removed, it's still unactualized. So it's only thanks to God who, in his kindness, makes that connection for us, for those of us that don't have an emotion, so that the thought can actually have a connection to the action and cause the action to happen and elevate that action. Now, actually, we're going to do a footnote now. Tanya has a footnote on the side, Haga. ve'etz chaim, as it says in the Kabbalistic works of the Zohar, the Etz Chaim, the tfuna otiot ben ubat. Tfuna, which is the word for the unbirthed emotions in the brain, in the mind, it has the same letters, the makeup of the letters of ben and bat. Son, which means in Hebrew son and daughter. Shehen, tchilu, v'rechimu, which are awe and love. A son is called love in the terms of Kabbalah, and a daughter is called awe. Ulefamim hatfuna yoredet lihiyot bochin benukva dezeranpin. And it says over there that there are times when these emotions that are still in the mind of awe and love will actually come down to the level of action. Shehen otiot haTorah v'mitzvot v'masker diavin, which are the letters of Torah and the fulfillment of mitzvot, practically, thought, speech, and action. And the wise one will understand. So that's the footnote, but it's essentially bringing a source from Kabbalah for this idea that we're explaining. Ad olam habriya, makom aliyat haTorah v'mitzvot, hanasim al yedei tchimu v'rechimu sichlim, asher v'itkalut libo mamash. So now, even though there's no open emotions, God does a favor and He elevates these thought, speech, and action that come from the intellectual emotions to a higher place, which is the same as it would be elevated if it was through actual emotions. In the words of the Tanya, this connection God does in order to uplift the action of the mitzvot and the involvement of the Torah that are done due to this good thought that we mentioned, until the world of Bria, and that is that there are 4 worlds, one above the other. The lowest world, which is our world, is called Asiya, and it also has a spiritual element too. We have the reality of the physical element, that's where we live. And then above this world of Asiya, there's Yetzira, which is second world. Third world is Bria, and the 4th world is Atzilut. So the good thought that one has, not without emotion, in the heart, elevates the action to the world of Bria. And the world of Bria is a place that angels serve God on a thinking level, on an understanding level. So our world is the world of Asiya, the world of action, physical action. Above us is the world of Yetzira. That is the world of emotion. That means that over there's emotions on a higher level, on a higher plane than what we feel in this world. There's much greater revelation of emotions, and that is the main makeup of that world. And then above that is the third world, the world of Bria, which is the world of intellect or contemplation or thinking. And over there you have true thinking. So you have angels over there that serve God with their thoughts. The whole makeup of the world is thinking. So that is the place where the Torah and mitzvot that are done through intellectual awe and love are elevated to, which happen in a revealed form of the heart, literally. So that is the thanks to God when one has a good thought even if they don't feel the emotion, it is elevated up to that world as if they did feel the emotion. Just as all the actions that do feel emotions are elevated to that level. But even if someone doesn't have a good thought, in any case, someone is just doing Torah and mitzvot out of routine. He puts on tefillin every day because that's just what he does. Not because necessarily he intellectually thinks about God and the greatness of God and how he wants to attach himself to him. Just does it. Without any life, let's just put it, it will still be elevated to the second world, which is the world of Yetzirah, and as we just said, is the world of emotions. Al yidei tchilu v'rechimu tivi'im hamesutachim b'lev kol Yisrael b'toldotam, through the awe and love that are natural and hidden in the heart of every single Jew, naturally. Like we're going to explain later on at length in, I believe, chapters 38, 39, and 40, if I'm not mistaken, that over there we're going to explain what kind of service of doing mitzvot elevates it to what level, essentially. But now's not the time really to focus on that, but what we just mentioned at the end is that even just doing something without any feeling will elevate it, because at the end of the day, you are doing it. Every Jew is doing it because deep down inside, they love God. And they acknowledge that God gave them this commandment to be connected to Him. Even if it's not intellectually revealed, or definitely not emotionally revealed, but deep down inside, they feel it because they have a neshama that's there. And therefore, it'll at least be elevated to the second world, as we'll explain. So just to wrap up, the key of this chapter is that do your best to think about the greatness of God and try your hardest through doing that a lot to feel real emotions of awe and love for Him. But if you don't, that's okay. Because just the thought itself, God considers it as if you felt that feeling. And that thought also elevates the action that you perform afterward, because you only perform that action because of the thought that you had. If you didn't have the thought, you wouldn't have done the action. Thank you very much for joining, and we'll see you next time.